Continuing on with yesterday's theme of refined things, I figure I'll talk about unrefined things, or base materials. Now, if we just imagine reality or existence, we can wonder, where does stuff come from? If we look at like a cycle of growth, for example, the trees seem to grow out of the dirt. Bacteria and such seems to grow in water or humid areas, and animals seem to grow from other animals, though there was a hypothesis that animals and bugs and other creatures, living creatures, spawned out of the air somehow, and that apparently you can create animals with certain ingredients, at least according to the golden chain of Homer. If you take murky water and boil it, and then you add small amounts of the water back, and you can create certain things like plants and animals. I don't know how true that is, but it's an interesting thought. But if we continue on with the thought, most things, the animals seem to eat plants or other animals. The plants seem to grow out of the earth and from the sun and such. Where does the earth come from? Where does the dirt come from? And then if you dig down a little from the dirt, you find this rock and this clay and this other stuff. At least the top layer of dirt seems to be some kind of mixture of dead organic things like plants and animals combined with the bottom minerals and clay and whatever from below. But where does the original, or what is the original matter, and where does it come from? One answer to that, of course, is space, the fifth element. Supposedly all things come from space, because where else is it really going to come from? If you don't have space, then you don't have a world. You can't have physical things outside of space. Well, you could somehow, kind of like in a computer where you have a video game where the video game doesn't really exist in space. Well, it does to an extent, but it's a hyperspace within space, as in within like a hard drive, which does exist in space. Then the data is feeding through, the motherboard, and the computer's basically processing it all and virtualizing it, graphics, virtualization, and all that stuff, and it makes a game, which is, a larger sub-world within a small world. Kind of like imagining things, you can imagine a big world within a small world of your imagination. But getting back, so maybe you could have something like that, but there's something probably to do with space and time. It seems like more things generate through space and time. Plants just magically seem to grow bigger and such. And excuse me, you might wonder, where exactly does the plant get its physical material from? Because you would assume equal material is exchanged, but there's been experiments where if you weigh the dirt that a plant was in before and after, that it weighs the same. It could be something to do with the ability to structure things in a different way. Like if you structure elements in a certain way, that they become heavier and lighter and such. Wood being that kind of, wood's like a strange sugar coagulation or something. Then is dirt, or that the black matter, which the black substance, the black element, is ultimately the unrefined, the crude material. It's crude oil, it's crude earth, it's crude mineral substances, etc., which is what all things spring from, it's the root, the source of physicality and materiality. So it's kind of like the idea, if you start taking from the earth, taking minerals, does that regrow? In at least the science we were told, science is always advancing, and of course there's plenty of things that are hidden from us, but at least in the science I was taught in school, no, it wouldn't, assumably. At least to the alchemists, they believed that the earth grew and minerals grew, and the way that you get things like gold into the earth was because minerals would heat and moisten themselves and have cycles of such, and then eventually they would grow more and more. It's kind of why if you mine an area, you kill off some of the a lot of the energy and you turn it into a desert. You kind of kill off the spiritual vibration of the land and all of the inhabitants they have to leave. Of course, we do need minerals, so it's it's one of those things where you just kind of have to do it sustainably, I guess. But yeah, it's possible that the minerals will regrow, but then you have to ask the same thing, just like how the plant grows. How does it increase its weight, its size, its volume through what? The plant, at least you can reason and rationalize and say, well, the plant is absorbing the sunlight and the water, the natural atmospheric water. Also the water underground and the minerals underground, and somehow all of these chemically create some kind of sugar-based substance, I think, to create the wood or the plantish material. But if you look at a plant grow, it's just this natural, complete system. It's not really, you're not really thinking about chemicals and all that kind of stuff. Similarly, if you could watch a mineral grow over the course of maybe 1,000 years, it would just be this constant evolution. So potentially through time and forces like heat and cold and moisture and such, that things just grow, for better or for worse. And a mineral, for example, it would chemically, at the quantum level, which is what atoms exist within, if I'm not mistaken, our elements exist. Is an atom those little things that make elements? I may have gotten that wrong, excuse me. I don't remember if elements are that small, but at least you have to have potentially some kind of quantum world phenomena where the elements change. It's like a cold fusion effect, potentially, where they just keep changing into different things. And then you have to ask, well, okay, if gold can come, I think the chain was like sulfur comes from just dirt, which is just, I guess, carbonous material. Then it was malachite or something comes from sulfur, or it was pyrite comes from that. That's, at least alchemically they thought that. And then it was malachite or something else, some green, I think an iron, a green iron, iron chloride as well, potentially from pyrite. That, and then apparently gold comes from markazite, some crystal called markazite or something. And then gold, they said, came from it. So if minerals come from other minerals, where do minerals come from ultimately? And then we go back to the idea of carbon. Well, potentially they come from carbon, and then carbon comes from death. It comes from dead plants, and the plant came from the sun and the moisture and just the natural movement of time growing it, and everything else. Everything is feeding off everything, so to speak. It's kind of connected in a way where everything's kind of transmuting everything else into itself. that's where you can begin differentiation between things, is that one thing, like a person, is kind of a unit of, you know, something, and it's drawing from everything else, and a plant is another unit. Now people can kind of become like collectives where they start to give their energy to something, and of course we're giving and taking to different degrees. So I guess in this regard we can say that base matter is created, or not base matter, we'll get to that, but things are created from other things, and usually everything to some extent feeds from dead matter. And now we can look at the idea of hydrogen, or hyle, I think was the word. What alchemists called the base matter, and you get words like hylic, you know, hyle, hydrogen, etc. All of that kind of stuff. The first element, of course, is, you know, being hydrogen, and the idea that in the idea of space, which was basically that hydrogen, you know, compressed and whirled and did all this stuff and formed gravity centers and then formed stars and all that, you know, and then that exploded into matter. That's the scientific idea. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't really know. The other idea is simply that hydrogen, which I guess, would you call that space? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's more, I think it comes after space. Space is the infinite darkness. Hydrogen is the energy. Maybe you could say it's like the energy of God within infinite darkness, infinite space. So you have this spatial energy, and if you've ever experimented with hydrogen, it causes a relaxing effect, and you can also burn it and it explodes, or it just instantly volatilizes into you know, I don't know what it turns into, but you know, heat is one thing. Excuse me. But you know, does it like transmute back into nothingness and heat, or does it? I don't know. Potentially through time, the hydrogen is you know, transmuting into atmosphere, which transmutes into like moisture, which transmutes, you know, bacterially. There's potentials that the earthly substances, the minerals, could be made from a bacterial substance, where due to the frequency of that regional area, the bacteria turns into certain things. At least there are experiments with stuff like silver and gold, where apparently silver and gold have no bacteria, and people have apparently multiplied these by multiplying the bacteria and then basically burning it down to, like, you know, metal again. So it's possible that bacteria has a play into this, where, you know, heat and moisture and all that, you know, bacteria loves that, and then they're just transmuting earth potentially. So it could be a transmutation through bacteria. There are, you know, ideas again, plants and various life forms, you know, animals and such, could be aided or helped or somehow created through that bacterial, you know, idea. But either way, there is a process of turning hydrogen into denser chemicals through time, which is the creation of raw, unrefined, dark substances, essentially heavier and heavier elements, more and more physical things, you know, growth, etc. And then we can ask the question, where does hydrogen come from? And I guess, you know, as I said, it's probably some kind of spatial energy. I imagine more and more of it comes through, you know, you could even say it comes from another dimension. I don't know. I think it's just like a natural phenomena of space. As time continues, I think space grows heavier, and it kind of space itself, you know, think of space as an actual tangible thing. It like condenses, so to speak. Potentially it condenses, which would be, hydrogen and maybe other elements. There could be other gases and such. They said from the dark waters come, I forget, something else. You have to read some alchemy books to learn that one. So from dark material, we burn it into refined white material. We get whiteness from blackness. At least we can. And can we get blackness from whiteness? Well, potentially you would assume hydrogen would be, that's white. That's a positive element. Space is a negative element. It's yin, it's black, and what's behind space is, I guess you would say God. All things and everything, which is kind of androgynous. So, there's this continuous interplay, kind of like an incestuousness almost, where you can also look at the interaction between hydrogen and space, or heat and water, heat and matter, etc. And if you know how to, stretch your mind a little and do some experiments, you know how to get one thing from the other and the other thing from one, how to get white from black and black from white, so to speak, how to get white from black is you burn. The way to refine things is through fire. Fire, heat pushes up. Water gives a base for things to fall, and it captures, things. It captures, if you have a gas, you can capture it in water and make like alcohol, that volatile alcohol, the gas. Volatile hydrochloric acid, that's a gas captured in water, which is a spiritualized version of, I think I'm not sure if you can use regular salt. You can just burn that and calcine into a gas and capture, but at least they would burn chlorine containing minerals, and you run that gas through water. And so you're taking raw materials and you're refining it into a thing, and then you're recapturing it back into another yin. So you go from yin to yang to yin, or negative to positive to negative, black to white to black again, except now you have a refined version of the blackness, which is a liquid. The liquid's a more refined version of a physical solid, you can think. So to get refined things, you have to, as I pretty much said, you have to refine base things. And if you allow refined things to corrupt themselves, to carry too much weight, to stagnate, if the waters, they stagnate by going cold, or the air goes cold and then it starts to go down, you can burn something with the smoke, which is a negative form of positive. Smoke, it's a dirty air, so to speak. Then it goes down eventually if it's cold. So then we can get into the idea of ghosts and spirits being highly refined. What if your energy, or if you want to give it as matter, whatever, it's more energy though. Where they go upwards because they're more refined, and then people in bodies are downwards, and then demonic people are so spiritually void that they are so enslaved into earth, NPCs and just evil people and all that. They're just enslaved down to physical reality and such. So hopefully that gave you something to think about and some interesting things. But that is the idea of unrefinedness in multiple different realms. Now it's up to you to process it and try it out and think about it and all that stuff. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed, of course, and feel free to check the links in the description, and have a nice day.